Talking with famous people. Alright, so hi, I'm host Eric, host Talking with Famous People. Welcome to Chapter 2 of Talking with Famous People, the second of two chapters that currently exist. This is Chapter 2. It begins here with Zachary. I'll probably upload this video Saturday morning as the launching spot of Chapter 2. So, talk to me, Zachary. I'm tired of talking.
Let's see. Well, the start of chapter 2, you want to have more individual one-on-one talks. I think that is a great idea. I really like this. When we brought on Patrick, like a week or so ago, was it a week or 2 weeks? That was really fun. I mean, up until like the point where it got kind of like aggressive, but or that was kind of fun too, honestly. But
Yeah, that was kind of fun too.
bringing a lot of people on, like how we were discussing, like relationships and whatnot, and having like topics where all of us kind of bounce off one another. That's really fun. I think you should turn. I think you should start hosting a podcast, and invite a lot of people on and have topics like that to discuss. I think that would be a great idea.
Well, I think that a podcast is a good idea if I can get it to automate somehow quickly and easily from the audio of my YouTube video.
Who's to say you can't use the camera on the podcast?
You can use the camera on a podcast?
Well, yeah, like you could just like the format, like when I guess when I said podcast, I guess that implies almost like a radio show. But I was thinking more of like having a few people like in a GoToMeeting or Google Hangouts or whatever program they use, and then having a bunch of people, with their cameras and whatnot, and it's kind of like you have topics and everyone discusses it. It's kind of like what we're doing now, maybe like another person or two, you know. Yeah, there's a few people I have in mind I could ask to see if they would be down to join a conversation about whatever, like hop in and discuss things. I find it really fun. When Patrick was in here last time, I thought that was really enjoyable.
Well, I mean, I would love to get some Bernie Sanders people on here.
Oh, I know plenty of Bernie supporters, man. I could definitely get us a Bernie supporter in here.
I would like to ask them questions. I wouldn't even argue against them. I'd just ask them questions. But
Hmm.
why wouldn't that involve, and doesn't that mean questions like that? And just watch the
Get a hold of their internal logic.
Do you not want Sprite or something?
yeah, I don't like Sprite. This is Zachary, by the way. He's from Kentucky.
I think we already met.
Okay. Well, I'd like to
Yeah,
introduce
briefly.
you to my YouTube people because you're on some of the episodes.
Okay. So do you
I
want
don't
me to...
like Sprite.
Okay.
Can I have another root beer? Or there's also Pepsi's in the car.
I will send you another root beer.
Okay, thank you. Another root beer's fine.
But see, my problem with or I kind of run it. That's kind of how I like to ask them questions. Just really get a hold of like their internal logic and just get an idea of where they're coming from. But it's hard to find them. It's hard to get them to open up like that.
I'm gonna go to the baseball game right now. Okay.
Okay, bye. What do you mean it's hard to get them to open up? If they're advocating for a candidate, shouldn't they expect to be asked about why they support that candidate and challenged on
Honestly,
those perspectives?
I think a lot of them. I don't know if they even necessarily support Bernie. I think they just get most of their information from social media and the like, or it's almost like a contrarian position as opposed to someone like Donald Trump because his they've seen like the social media and whatnot demonize him to such an extent where they default to this Sanders position. I mean, I'm sure some of them have some legitimate reasons for supporting him. I know a couple of people who probably would be down to discuss that.
The thing about Trump, I wish he didn't say all that stupid racist shit against Mexicans, because I could totally find myself embracing that particular bit of contrarianism for sure. If I'm limited to the extent that I'm willing to fully advocate for him mostly because of his stupid Mexico shit. Because it's like,
the wall and whatnot.
yeah, well, I mean, and he's such a racist. I mean, not that I really care about racism particularly. It's not a big deal for me. But it's like, who says shit like that? It's like, well, because Mexicans are coming over and they're a bunch of rapists and they bring drugs and all that sort of
Well,
stuff.
I think the exact quote was something like, Mexico isn't sending us their best; they're sending us their rapists, drug dealers, murderers, and then I assume some are good people. That's kind of like paraphrased, but I think that was like the quote. So I think like it was like borderline racist.
Well, okay, but
I
okay, I have a problem with it for a couple of reasons. One, Mexico's not sending them to us.
That's true. Yeah,
It's not like the
that is true.
government saying, "Now you go be an illegal immigrant. Now you,
Yeah,
now
like,
you."
they get criminals, and it's just all right. You're getting deported to America.
Congratulations, you get the illegal immigration pass.
Yeah,
Right?
that's true.
They're not sending us anybody. But anyway, that's fine. I get it. That to me, it's not necessarily a deal killer. The thing I do like about Trump is he's not a politician, and so he's not been inured to the notion that uh, government action is a good thing. At least he may have a more instinctually libertarian uh, approach to things as a business person than he would as a long term government employee.
As you were saying, kind of like it's like you said, the inherent kind of or the kind of like a almost an unconscious libertarianism where it's like he kind of sees like I think with the foreign like his foreign policy and stuff he just consults a very few people, it's he kind of has that, the government doesn't have to get involved here. I have the answers. We could approach it this way. We don't have to get everyone on the government in itself on board, and et cetera. So I see what you're saying. Yeah, he kind of has that almost unconscious libertarianism.
But I don't think I could probably vote for him. I voted for Gary Johnson. If it were a really tight race and it came down to Bernie and Trump or Hillary's worse than Bernie. I wouldn't want Hillary.
Yeah, that's pretty much. I think everyone. Well, it's funny because like everyone I know has that opinion, but it's still funny to see like her winning states and stuff. Still, I don't know one person. I can't even think of one person I know who even slightly is inclined to supporting Hillary.
Well, I tell you why people vote for Hillary. They vote for Hillary because they're voting for um, familiarity. They don't. They're voting for a perceived difference in, well, with Hillary, you know what you're going to get. You're going to get competent bureaucracy. That's what people think who vote for her. And competent bureaucracy is a good thing. But, and I don't like her, but Bernie's too risky. I don't feel comfortable with him. I don't know about this whole, he's too out there. I don't know. Those are the people who vote for
Yeah, but
Hillary, right? The people who are statists.
it's kind of like they're on the left, but they just kind of yeah, like you said, the familiarity. I think maybe a lot of the left thinks that Bernie is perhaps too extremist in his, taxing policies and whatnot, but they still want to vote Democratic. Maybe because they feel that it directly supports their group of people,
What's the
such as
primary?
minorities and
If they're
whatnot.
going to vote in the primary at all, there are going to be two camps of voters. There are going to be the impassioned voters who might not normally vote but are voting for sure this time because of Bernie, kind of a
Mhm.
thing. And then there's going to be the people who always voted the primary because that's what they've always done. And there's a lot of people like that, that like Candace, my ex-wife, she would vote at the primary. She would have voted for she probably would vote for Bernie, but that would be because around here it's it's sort of standard. But in places where it's a little less left than Southern California, um, intellectuals community, or more married to that, then she probably would vote for Hillary, because she's not going to vote for Republican, because that's her way of being of distinguishing her identity from her parents, is that she votes Democrat. To the extent that she has any political opinions, they're those sort of political opinions. Well, I'm different from my parents because I vote Democrat. Well, it's not really a political opinion, is it? But it's just sort of an identity thing. I vote. I'm a good citizen, so I vote regularly. And I'm different from my parents in that I'm a little younger. I'm younger. I'm more aware.
I'm a free thinker.
Yeah, so I vote Democrat. But and it was like, that would be sort of my ex-wife's political position.
So did you guys always align, or I guess if that's always your position, then you lean more towards libertarianism. Did you guys always align with your political candidates, or not very often?
She didn't care about politics at all, is the thing. What I'm saying, it didn't stop her from voting. In fact, she was very reliably a voter. She considered it her civic duty. Couldn't give a fuck less about any of it, but she voted anyway, and she'd vote for a mainstream candidate. One of the mainstream candidates. I don't know. She wouldn't want to talk to me about it. She'd just be like, well, I'm just going to vote for Obama. Well, why, though? I like him. Okay.
Okay, that's something I want to talk about. What do you think about, we're under democracy, so obviously everyone's vote counts. Do you think that's the right way to operate a government? Do you think that's the best form of government?
No, hell no. Of course not. I mean,
I agree.
It's insane. You don't want direct democracy, but you do. I mean, yeah, you do, but it has to be full blast. Then it's got to be like, it's got to be full blast in its choosing, and then incredibly local in its scope. The answer is localization. So you want democracy, but you want it as localized as possible, so that to the extent that any oppressive laws are made, they only apply to your block.
See what you're saying. So like state rights.
Well, I would go way more local than that. States are way too big now. I mean, they were the right size maybe when states were when that was put into place, and there was like the population of the San Gabriel Valley in the whole state, So it's like, then fine, okay. Yeah, I know. Oh, yeah, I know Tom from 100 miles away. I know which Tom you're talking about. That guy, I know him. I met him one time when we both went to the market 50 miles in between us. It's 50 miles from each of us. I see him at the market every 3 weeks when we sell our peaches and stuff. It was like that, then fine. And you got to vote for people in that situation by they have to go around and go on the train and stop at the train stations and say, hey, this is who I am. This is why you should vote for me. They send out text information to you, like printed literature for you to read to try to convince you of stuff. There's newspapers people read, and then other people give their opinions. But it's such a limited actual accessibility of information in the old system that I guess it was as good as I could come up with. We can come up with a shitload better ideas right now than we can come up with back then because we have way more tools available to us.
Mm-hmm.
How would you structure government?
I don't even know. I really don't. There was the last philosophy club meeting on my campus was over what the best form of government was, and I went in there completely clueless. I think a lot of them have there's obviously benefits to each of them, but there's obviously flaws to each of them as well. And then like under democracy, obviously that flaw would be the group consensus isn't always, the best for the group. You know what I mean? But I honestly don't know how I would structure government. I think possibly monarchism if the leader knows what they're doing, but the problem with that is obviously corrupt leaders and whatnot. But I'm honestly not informed enough to really know. I have no opinion.
If I were going to make a government, it would be this: the government is limited to taxes, to taxing the federal government is limited to taxing state governments, and can only tax state governments in an itemized fashion. So I would say the federal government can say, we're taxing you, state of California, this much because of we are spending this much on roads and we're spending this much on defense. This is your cut of defense and your cut of the roads and whatever. And those are the only things. In fact, they shouldn't even be in charge of roads. That should be a state issue. So we just have the federal government in charge of basically federal defense, and I would say they should be in charge of money. If we're going to have a fiat currency, which is kind of unavoidable, then they're in charge of money. Or, I mean, no, it's not unavoidable, Eric. Why are you being an idiot? Go Bitcoin, something like that, dark coin, something that's not traceable but that's reliable. But then anyway, they're in charge of environmental and defense, and then the state's in charge of defending rights, natural rights. It's all a natural rights framework. It says the government's there to prevent people from violating one another's natural rights, to prevent exploitative or unfair anti-competitive practices in the market, and to prevent environmental degradation. And that's it.
Elaborate more on individual rights. So how do we define those rights? What are those rights?
Well, we define a right as that which confers a duty upon another. Negative rights are the duty of non-interference is conferred upon the other. So you don't have any right to water, but you do have a right for me not to push you out of the way every time you go into the drinking fountain. So you have a right to get yourself water, and you have right to access a public drinking fountain, because it doesn't belong to anybody, it belongs to all of us, and so thus we all have equal access to it. And what no one has the right to do is violate your property, and your first piece of property is your body. So that means nobody can use any physical violence against you, and all the other rights are derived from property rights as well. So if you have a right to privacy, it's because you have ownership claim over a given space, and thus can choose to exclude others from it. To the extent that somebody violates your privacy, then they're violating your property rights, and so forth and so on. So the only positive rights there are contractual rights, which are, if I go to Denny's, order a meal, I am contractually obligated, and they have a positive right to anticipate that I shall pay them before I leave. So that's the difference between positive and negative rights. The government's job is to protect, enforce, and punish violations of negative rights, which means they cannot be engaged in redistributive poverty policies where they're like taking money from rich people, giving to poor people. They can't be giving out free shit. That's not their job.
But Eric, that's not compassionate. How can you be so heartless?
The thing is, it's so much more compassionate. People don't understand. They're not thinking about it right. It's like what the government is doing. People see it as like there's a big pile of money that's the wealth of a country, and it's split up amongst everybody. And like Bill Gates gets an unfairly large share of this money. But that's not how it goes at all. Wealth is created. It doesn't exist to be split. So when you create a big pile of wealth, that means it's up to you to see it distributed out into the rest of the economy, as it will eventually become, unavoidably. But it doesn't happen all at once, and it shouldn't happen all at once, because the person who does the work has earned the reward and the right to see it distributed and spent and whatnot how he sees fit. The fact is, it didn't exist to be split up before he made it. You don't have any claim to it, you know? That's why the whole metaphor of like, oh, well, it's the income inequality and the wealth of this country is not fair. That 99% have this much and 1% have this much of it. It's not a finite thing. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, that's a good point. It isn't a finite thing. So what would you say to the Bernie supporter, for example, who says, "Oh, well, he's not a socialist. He's a democratic socialist." What would you respond with that?
Okay. I'm not talking about his label. I'm talking about his policies, which are terrible.
I agree. Yeah, I don't think it's okay. So, do you think, like, as a libertarian, do you think we should try to minimize welfare as much as possible?
Yeah, we should eliminate it entirely.
What do you think in what areas should we replace that money into?
Well, look, what I think we should do is cut more or less everything that doesn't fit the description I just said. So we should get rid of Homeland Security. That's not defense. The federal government has no business doing any sort of law enforcement activity. That's not the business of the federal government. We can get rid of the Department of Justice for all matters except enforcing laws upon the states. That part they still get to do. They should still be able to go to say, Alabama, you're not protecting the voting rights of these people or whatever. That's okay for them to do because then they're not policing individual people, they're policing the states. So, okay, they should be able to do that. And then I would get rid of things like Department of Education. Nix that. That's a poison on this American culture for too long now. I'd get rid of the
Department of Education. Is that where the Common Core is that we're referring to?
Well, that's California.
What do you
Was that in the federal level too? I didn't even realize that was. I mean, they're always coming up with
I'm
new
not sure if
crazy
that is.
nonsense.
I'm uninformed on it.
Well, Common Core is one of the things I know we're doing here in California in the public schools, where they're trying to focus more on critical thinking, higher order thinking skills, and less on road shit. And I don't know. It's probably an improvement, but you're never going to fix the public schools because they're not owned by anybody. That's the problem. They're not owned by anybody. They have no accountability. If that teacher does a bad job, they still get paid. They're a public employee, and they're the teachers union, which is like insanely powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and also if the teacher does a really good job, they don't get paid more for doing a really good job. They don't get paid less for doing a bad job. That's a problem. If a parent complains, the administrator tries to get the parent to complain less. The teacher tries to figure out a way to appease the parent. Why would I just give your kid an A? Why? Because it's a hassle. Not because anybody's job's at stake.
Yeah. And do you think you think if we had like a tuition-free university thing going on in our country, as like Bernie supports, do you think that the same issue with public schools would extend into universities?
I think it already does. I mean, would it make it worse? Yeah, it would make it. It would make it worse. It would also would devalue university education. Now all of a sudden you're gonna have what, twice as many college students? I don't know. And then
Probably more than that.
Because I mean, why the hell would you start working when you can get a free college education? Now, how many of them are actually qualified to go to college and get something meaningful out of it? Not all of them. A lot of people aren't meant to be on an academic track.
That's true.
And, it's like we tend to force them all into academic tracks so they can go get professional jobs. But, sweetie, you've got to get a professional job. Well, first of all, those days are over, man. There's no such thing anymore as this is your career for your whole life. I mean, you're going to have multiple lives. Everybody does. I do. And I didn't even start life as in the right time. I started a little too young. I wish I would have been born in like 2000 would be a better year to have been born in, for sure. I mean, I'd still be 15 years old, but we probably wouldn't be talking to you.
Yeah, we'd be on different paths.
I'd be at my high school right now, learning about history or something.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still really young, and I'm still in the process of developing all of my political views and in general, like philosophical views. Everything is pretty much like an ongoing process at this point, and it's very subject to change. I've noticed that.
Well, if I were going to argue against the libertarian position, this would be the best way to argue why I'm wrong. Is you'd say, well, first of all, you're not really being realistic about human nature, which is to the extent that we enforce a strict and literal interpretation of a negative rights framework, then you allow for all sorts of exploitation to happen. There's no reason in this framework, for example, why you can't trick a little kid into doing something horrible and say, well, I had that kid, he consented. There's no reason in a natural rights framework to assume that minors would be treated differently than older people. After all, they have the same property rights to their body, don't they? If in fact we were to apply this rights issue straight down the line, then wouldn't we necessitate a society in which each parent has to protect their kid from predators all the time? And in fact, wouldn't we legalize things like child rape? If the child rapist could convince the child to say, okay, fine, you can have sex with me, wouldn't that be an inherent result of enforcing this framework as you say it is, Eric? And then also, wouldn't it be the case that if I, say, had a, I don't know, nuclear bomb, that there would be no way to take this nuclear bomb from me legally without violating my natural rights? Because after all, it's my property. I haven't done anything wrong. There's no justification for you using violence to take it away from me or threat of force or anything like that. And yet, I think we can all agree that we wouldn't want people walking around with nuclear bombs. There's a reason why, as a group, we enforce limits on individuals. It's because individuals cannot be reliably trusted to act in ways that are consistent with the safety of each of the other individuals in the group. And that's why, some of the time at least, we need to prioritize utilitarian group outcomes over your binary natural rights framework.
So do you along with libertarianism, or do you support utilitarianism over, like you said, you just mentioned it, over the individual rights? Do you resonate a lot with utilitarianism
I think
well?
utilitarianism should never drive policy, but it should be absolutely factored into punishments. And so basically, it's like, it shouldn't be factored into whether or not you have done a crime. Whether or not if you punch somebody, you committed a crime, you violated their natural rights. But utilitarian things should be absolutely considered when deciding the punishment. Well, you may have punched him in the face, but you were both drunk and he was saying awful things about your girlfriend, and you both don't want any charges to be pressed, so fine, let's just let you go. All right? So in that instance, I think utilitarian concerns absolutely need to be factored in. But it needs to go in that order. First, let's adjudicate the issue on what the natural rights outcome is. The natural rights outcome is you fucked up. But utilitarianism allows us to let you go anyway. That's my take on that. Talking with famous people.